We're going to give people a minute to arrive. Welcome. We also have some opportunities to check out on this home screen as you're arriving and getting settled. Welcome to everyone who's signing in. Nice to see you all. Thank you for joining. Okay. Right. Well, we're recording and we'll get started now and see who else joins us. So welcome everyone. This is the first webinar to introduce the National Restorative Coaching Program, which is offered through the National Center on Restorative Justice and funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. So thank you to our partners. My name is Justine Andreo Darling. I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Restorative Justice at the University of San Diego, and I also coordinate this coaching program. We have a great team here today that's supporting this webinar as well. So we have Lucy Stein-Cartford, who is the Assistant Director at the Center for Restorative Justice at USD, and is also part of the support team for the coaching program, and will be helping me introduce the coaching program today. We also have Avery Arrington, who is the Assistant Director for the Training Division of the National Center on RJ, and she will be helping with our tech support. So thank you, Avery. And we also have two of our restorative coaches here to tell you about their experiences in the program, Tanina Hekimara and Kathleen McGoy. And we also have a practitioner that received coaching through the program, and that is Jenna Gottlieb. So thank you, team, for joining us today, and thank you to everyone who registered with interest in participating in the coaching program. It's great to see you all. We wanted to start with our goals for our time together. So we'll start with a short presentation on how this program got started, what coaching is, and how it can be useful to you in your work, and what participating in the program looks like. And then we'll hear from our coaches and practitioner, and we'll leave some time at the end for questions. So please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A feature, and we'll answer them at the end. And the chat function is disabled for the webinar. Okay, so we'll start with the coaching program origins. Where did this come from? So there's a high volume of restorative trainings available nationally, and rarely it's paired with ongoing coaching and support. Even in our year-long certificate in restorative justice, facilitation, and leadership that we have at USD, we have coaching built into the program, but I regularly have requests from graduates from our program that they need ongoing consultation for their restorative efforts. So we know restorative justice is very challenging to implement, especially in our punitive and punishment-oriented society. And it's also a lifelong journey. So we know restorative professionals need ongoing support in their efforts, and I imagine that's why many of you are here today. The Center for Restorative Justice is one of 3 academic institutions that make up the National Center on Restorative Justice, which is the NCORJ, and that's funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And there are three branches of NCORJ, including higher education, public education, and research. This coaching program is coming from the public education branch to support the restorative efforts of professionals working in the criminal justice field. So this includes people working in criminal justice, like district attorneys, public defenders, probation officers, police officers, and others, and also those working in partnership with the criminal justice system, like community organizations and nonprofits that are providing restorative justice alternatives. And it also includes educators working to find alternatives to punitive discipline systems in K-12 schools and in higher education. So lots of people that we're trying to serve through this program. And through our NCORJ partnership, we requested funding from the BJA specifically to build out this coaching program, and we launched in the spring of 2023 with a small pilot program. So right now we're moving in beyond our pilot program into the next phase of the program. And I'll turn it over to Lucy to share more.
All right. So one of the things that I want to talk about really quickly is why coaching was the thing that we decided on top of the fact that there's been such good results from the certificate program in having mentors to build relationships with the people going through the certificates. And one of the reasons is because of what coaching is. So Jenny Rogers is a professional coach who has written several books, and she also instructs coaching courses. And she says that coaching is the art of facilitating another person's learning, development, well-being, and performance. Sorry, I have a very enthusiastic feline partner with me today, and she's changing the slides on my behalf. So to go back to Jenny Rogers, coaching raises self-awareness and identifies choices. Through coaching, people are able to find their own solutions, develop their own skills, and change their own attitudes and behaviors. So coaching essentially provides us with the tools that we need to do this really important restorative work, which often requires us to examine our own attitudes and behaviors and help people within the systems that we work in do the same thing. And it also helps people identify obstacles and come up with their own action plans to overcome those obstacles. Finally, my favorite part of coaching is that it helps you identify the community that surrounds you that you may not have been aware of, or you may not be aware is in a position to help. So instead of providing some kind of instruction or some kind of consultation that would provide the answers to practitioners, coaching helps practitioners build their own skills, and it helps all of us in a mutually beneficial relationship make the RJ community stronger. So we then had to choose who were the coaches, who were the folks who could provide this kind of assistance and education to our practitioners. Since we are focusing specifically on folks who are working within criminal justice and in partnership with criminal justice, our coaches come from these communities as well. So we have a broad range of coaches, active DAs, retired police officers. We also have educators, community-based nonprofit leaders. And as you know, the restorative justice world also combines talents and industries and backgrounds in ways that we may not see in other places. So at NRCP, we are not trying to draw our coaches from a really rigid list, but find people whose experiences and depth of understanding of RJ can help practitioners in this growing field. The other thing I just want to emphasize really quickly is that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So our coaches also have the opportunity to expand their own network, to learn from the practitioners they work with, to expose themselves to new ideas. So we're really excited about the ways in which coaching offers mutual benefit on both sides of the relationship. Justine, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you. Okay, so yes, where are we now? Well, our practitioners in the program are basically going to receive 8 hours of free one-on-one coaching. So that's what we can provide in a coaching practitioner relationship. And they're paired with coaches based on, the priorities, experience, and area of work of the practitioners and the coaches. So we try to create the perfect match. But we have, a small team, so we try our best. And we're accepting practitioners on a rolling basis. And we're looking to accept about 20 more practitioners for the fall semester. And coaching is focused around the current challenges that practitioners are facing. And, so it's a very open program that can meet whatever needs you're currently wanting to address in your restorative efforts. Okay. And then coaching is focused around 4 competency areas. If you can, kind of visualize the different areas of your life as a restorative practitioner, there's mindset and confidence building. So this is a personal reflective journey. And then there's skills and techniques, like facilitating circles or addressing harm in a restorative way and learning deeper skills and techniques around the restorative efforts that you're doing. And then there's knowledge, like cutting edge research or resources that could help you in your efforts. And then well-being circles back to that personal journey of, battling burnout or reflecting on where you fit in the restorative field. So there's a lot of different pieces, but these are the main areas that we look to that coaches can help with. Okay. And where are we now? We're moving into the fall with lessons learned from the pilot and ready to place another 20 practitioners or so with coaches this fall. We have a team of 10 coaches with lots of different experiences, as Lucy shared, and their main goal is really to be flexible and responsible to practitioners' needs and to share their wisdom, experiences, and resources that they've gained over decades of experience in the field. So this grant-funded project can only accommodate 40 practitioners to be coached per year through 2027. And we know this free program is only scratching the surface of the need for coaching in the restorative field. So we hope our program is just one of many. And we're also open to providing coaching for a fee beyond the grant. So please reach out to me if you're interested in that. And then we'll move on to application details. So the current lead time for practitioner applications is 4 to 6 weeks. So if you apply right now, you'll hear from us within the next month or so. And then coaching applications are actually currently closed, and we anticipate that they'll open again in January of 2024 when we're trying to expand the team further. And you can email us if you're interested in being a coach, and we'll put you on a list and reach out to you when that application reopens. And then the last slide is just where if you want to apply for the program and submit an intake form as a practitioner wanting a coach, you can go to ncorj.org/coaching, and the application is there. And then also you can use this email here, center4rj@sandiego.edu, if you have any follow-up questions or interests that we spoke of today. And most importantly, we want to get on to hearing from our coaches and practitioner. So I'm going to turn it over to them by asking a first question. It's a general question, just to get to know them a little bit better. Who are you, and what experiences do you bring to your restorative coaching role and your RJ efforts? And I will pass it over to Taninia to start.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taninia Hekimara, and who am I? That's a big question, and I could take up the rest of the time telling you that, but I won't. I'm an African-American woman, she, her pronouns, that has been doing this type of work since birth, either in the Jedi spaces or the RJ spaces. It's very close to my heart. In terms of how I feel about RJ, it's the piece that was missing in the early diversity work that really helps people move through. And so when I found it, when it found me, I was very appreciative of it. And it's just changed the way in which schools and universities and organizations have been able to change. I work with, I do coaching in addition to the coaching I do here with administrators and teachers. I work in schools, K through university level, and I also work on systems work, because if you're just changing the people, but you're not changing the system that is holding bias and harm in it, then you'll have to keep hiring me for that. And the idea is for me to work myself out of a job and help social justice organizations and schools and school districts build inclusive and cultures of belonging through this work. I also do curriculum of belonging work. I used to call it anti-racist, anti-bias curriculum. And so I help schools change the way they do that, and in order to add to lessening the harm. I'm also in yoga and mindfulness, so I do a lot of nervous system settling work with people and trainings and things of that sort. So that's kind of who I am. I also train the trainers, but that's pretty much who I am and what I'm doing. And coaching is my favorite part of everything that I do. So thank you for being here. And I will pass it to Kathleen.
Thank you, Taninia. My name's Kathleen McGoy. I use she, her pronouns. And I come to restorative justice from a background in international peace building. I began my career implementing service-based educational programs on the US-Mexico border. And through that work, I became really interested in what's possible when we can bring together people who have perceived differences, different life experiences and backgrounds, to come into relationship through storytelling directly with each other. And I found that that was a really effective way for growth in new perspectives, understanding oneself and the world through a different lens. And that's really what led me to studies in, what are the different formal processes for peace work in the world. And I discovered this model of conflict transformation. And I was really excited. I encourage anyone who's doing restorative justice to become familiar with conflict transformation. For me, that is how, as Taninia said, restorative justice found me. It was through this interest in what it means to transform conflicts, and through that transform and heal in ourselves and our relationships. Once I discovered restorative justice, I began working at an organization in Longmont, Colorado called Longmont Community Justice Partnership. It's a nonprofit organization that provides restorative justice as an alternative to the criminal justice system, primarily by referrals through law enforcement, but we also develop partnership with local schools and court as a method for both youth and adults to be diverted out of the criminal system and instead participate in a community-based process through which we really engaged volunteer community members to be the facilitators and community representatives in those restorative justice dialogues. So what I became most passionate about during that time was the possibility of applying restorative principles and values in all contexts and settings. So taking restorative practices out and beyond schools and the criminal system and looking at restorative workplace culture, restorative relationships within families, so on and so forth. And that interest led me to move on from the nonprofit work that I was doing and launch a small business in 2021, which is what I'm doing now, working in 3 main areas. So one is training and coaching to integrate restorative practices into all environments. And a large piece of that is working with nonprofit organizations that want to build a restorative workplace culture and develop healthier relationships at work. The second area is facilitation of incidents of harm using a restorative process when there's been a conflict or an incident in the workplace or in a family. And the third area is consultation and training for cities that seek to implement restorative justice as an alternative to the criminal justice system. And I'll just share another role and contribution that I've had in this field is as the co-author of the Little Book of Restorative Teaching Tools, which is a text that offers support for all of you who are interested in using experiential learning to teach skills for restorative justice. And it's focused on the how and why of building capacity in restorative practitioners in a restorative way, which is one of the approaches that I bring to my role as a coach. And I'll pass to Jenna.
Thanks, Kathleen. My name is Jenna, and I use she, her pronouns. And I had a long career in sexual violence. So I worked with survivors and I worked with training people who address sexual violence. And I got really tired of seeing the cycles of harm just continue and continue and continue. Eventually, I moved to prevention work and I worked with high schoolers on prevention of sexual violence. And that really helped me to change my perspective, to understand the root causes, to understand things in context, and to understand the risk and protective factors for why people go on to cause harm. I did a lot of anti-oppression work while I was doing sexual violence work. And all of that was how restorative justice found me, to use similar language, because I think that we need a different way to stop cycles of harm. We need to come from a place of understanding and see how oppression is at the root of all of this and how we can support communities in using restorative practices so that we can help folks stop cycles, empower folks. And that is what led me to the current position that I'm in, that Kathleen has been supporting me in. I am the director of Restorative Jeffco, a new up and coming organization, community-based organization in Jefferson County, Colorado, that works to divert cases out of the criminal legal system with a long-term vision of building capacity within organizations, within communities, organizations, so that they can handle their own cases and again, work ourselves out of a job.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you all. Very inspiring efforts. And I wanted to ask a second question. This one's for our 2 coaches, Taninia and Kathleen. What are the primary impacts that you've noticed that coaching has? And if you could share a story about one of your coaching interactions to kind of bring it to life, that would be helpful too. I'll pass it. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So the impacts. So there's a few. One of the biggest impacts, especially in schools, is a lot of the practitioners that have been asked to do this work are alone. And it's reminiscent of when they first started having the diversity person. right? That diversity person was responsible for the implementation, the strategy, and figuring it all out without really having a budget, without having clear direction, being the expert at the school, but not necessarily an expert. And I find that coaching really helps the practitioner to be able to settle into this not feeling alone when they have a coach. I also believe that it's not, restorative justice isn't new, but now there are so many more jobs that people are expected to do restorative justice. So there's a lot of fresh learners coming out of programs, and, you know, learning it in theory, even if you're able to practice with your cohort, it's different when you're dropped in, and there are real impacts to the community that you're working in. And so I found that there's this failure to launch sometimes, this fear, and having a coach allows practitioners to be able to lean into that because they have a thought partner. They have someone who's done it before. They literally have somebody to say, it's going to be okay. And every circle is different, like all of these things that they learned in school, but now you've forgotten because now you're there, you're doing it. And then the strategy for getting, you know, I found that schools want it, districts want it, but not everybody has bought into it. And so helping them to think through and develop a strategy for rolling it out, and reminding them that we've been in punitive for a very, very long time. We still live in punitive. I still have a punitive mindset, right? My restorative mindset is up front, but I fight to keep it there because you know, at my age, that's what I knew for so many years. And really helping them to slow it down. Like we want everything quickly. Like we want things to change. The truth is culture change takes time. And so allowing them, giving them permission to slow down and come up with a sustainable way to roll it out. Every single community is different. Every single school is different. And tailoring it to where you are instead of taking something that's academic and saying it has to be done this way. So really giving permission to understand their own community and develop what works for them without necessarily using another model in order to lay on top of the community, because you have to move at the speed of trust in the community and the speed of their ability for the resilience of these new things that they're learning. So I think that that's the biggest value added to it. And I don't have a specific story. I'm just going to say that the practitioners, all the practitioners that I've worked with, these have been the core pieces that they've been working through in terms of what they need in order to set themselves up and their schools up for success.
Thanks so much, Taninia. Yeah, when I think about this question, what are the primary impacts of coaching? One of the first things I thought of, and I'll just mention briefly, is what Taninia shared, is that we know so many restorative justice practitioners are doing their work alone and expected to carry a lot of responsibility across many different areas, often with very little support or understanding for everything that they're being asked to do. And in particular, that they are often the steward of the restorative paradigm, working against that mindset that Taninia referenced that is so pervasive in our society, that we are pretty much conditioned to have a first response that's punitive. So it's asking a lot of practitioners to be the person who's holding and standing up for integrity with restorative responses. And with something I want to build on from that is just, we referenced in the slides the opportunity for coaches to support well-being. So one of the impacts that I've seen of coaching is being, as a coach, I can be someone who validates, acknowledges, and shows sincere empathy and compassion for the pressures that restorative practitioners are managing, and give them an outlet to acknowledge how difficult it really is and make suggestions at times for how to prevent burnout, how to find ways to replenish their own being and system to continue doing the important work. A second impact that I really value is the opportunity to draw out a practitioner's inner knowing and wisdom, because we do know that it's our personal stories and our personal experiences that bring richness to this work. And we know that sometimes it's hard to find a place for that when we're juggling so many different expectations and responsibilities. So as a coach, I've been able to elicit, reflect, and support, oh, you already know this. You already have wisdom that you bring to this role and this work. Let's develop that even more and utilize what you know to be responsive to your particular community. So like Taninia said, moving outside of just an academic understanding of a restorative framework and actually making it personalized and customized and culturally responsive. And the last thing I wanted to say about impacts was just being somebody who can track and validate and celebrate growth and success, because sometimes you can't see that. This is true of any role. You can't see how you have grown alone. You need somebody to hold up that mirror and say, wow, look at where we are, several sessions later since we started this coaching relationship. And I think we all need that. We all need those moments of celebrating achievement, also to support well-being and recognize the impacts that we're having. So a story that I could share about a powerful coaching interaction. I was working with a practitioner who's carrying a heavy weight of responsibility, working alone. And it wasn't just about what they were expected to accomplish, but they were concerned about the how of getting it done, and a real effort to be in integrity with restorative values, and recognizing they needed to build credibility for restorative justice as they tried to actually complete tasks along the way. And that meant interacting with many different stakeholders who have many different value sets, many different critiques or hopes for restorative justice. So in short, just really big expectations for this practitioner. Some of their responsibilities included fundraising, educating the community, and getting buy-in from all kinds of stakeholders who they may have had different experiences in the past, like varying degrees of experience working with those stakeholders in the past. What I loved about working with his practitioner was that over the course of our coaching sessions, they came in organized to each session with specific topics that they wanted to address. So we were able to cover all of those 3 areas that I just mentioned in this really wonderful dynamic of, so I could share about my experience having worked with law enforcement on restorative justice implementation for 8 years, and I could reinforce the skills and strengths that the practitioner was bringing naturally from their own background. After they had specific interactions, such as sitting down with a chief of police, we could debrief that interaction and celebrate what went well and look at what are we going to have to problem solve about the challenges that came up. So there was that kind of before and after, which was not only, I think, supportive for the practitioner, but also really fulfilling and rewarding for me to be in that thought partnership with them. And what I noticed from this progression was how the practitioner's own confidence in their own capacity was growing over time. So through our relationship and through being able to track how things were shifting, as I mentioned before, celebrating the wins. There was increase in, yeah, this is going well. I can see where this is going. Even though there's more work to be done, there are these benchmarks of being able to really appreciate what they were accomplishing as they went. And, in the spirit of restorative practices, our relationship and sense of trust with each other grew, which just meant that there was a whole other sense of community building happening between us in the background, which I think is one of the greatest gifts of this coaching program, is that we're building a larger collective network of practitioners so that we're strengthening our community along the way. And I'll pass back to Justine.
Thank you, Taninia and Kathleen. What I'm hearing is just how this whole program is a very mutually beneficial experience, and we're all in it together and sharing wisdom and supporting one another, and that we need that as colleagues, and to also live the work that we do in restorative justice, that relationships are at the heart. So we need all of these supportive relationships to help us do our restorative work. So thank you to both of you for sharing those tidbits of wisdom. And I also wanted to ask Jenna a question as a practitioner in this program, specifically about what you and your coach were working on, what you found to be most helpful in your coaching relationship, and even possibly how the coaching supplemented any training or restorative experiences that you already had.
Sure. There's a lot. I could talk about how much I took away from this experience. But I think one of the things that was mentioned is just feeling alone in your job and having somebody there to support you, to validate you, and relationship, right? That's one of the main tenets of restorative justice. Building that relationship with my coach, with Kathleen, was a huge part of what we did, because I was able to come to her with vulnerability and say, I'm overwhelmed. I'm really nervous about this piece. And to have her be able to hold that, to validate my experience of feeling overwhelmed, to wear so many hats, and have a space regularly where I could come to and kind of just get organized. It was almost like having supervision because I'm the director and I don't have somebody to go to for support, and having Kathleen there to support me. Kathleen had the position essentially that I'm in right now. And it's so huge to have somebody who's done this before to help walk me through creating it. It helped because I don't have any staff to work with. I don't have a boss. But it also helped because there were so many concrete little things that I needed support around, like developing a memorandum of understanding with the police department. It helped with finding different resources. It helped with liaising and talking and educating about RJ with all of the different community partners and community members about how do I frame RJ with different audiences, and just navigating all of the different systems as a community-based agency, working with those systems, and how do we talk about RJ in a way that will make sense to them and that maintains RJ without compromise. And I think that was something that was really important for me, and that we spent a lot of time talking about, for example, with the memorandum of understanding, how much am I willing to compromise on to work with an agency and still like have something that has the integrity of RJ. And so we spent a lot of time talking through that. And I think, you know, talking about that helped me to realize I know that, right? I know I have these core ideas of what this organization needs to hold true to. And that kind of helped me to support what is my lens with RJ? What is my lens with anti-oppression and RJ together? And it was so great having Kathleen, because she's in Colorado and I'm in Colorado, and she's able to connect me to people who I can meet with, who I can talk with in our own state. So there were so many different pieces about what this coaching experience supported me through, and that it still continues, right? I can look back to that and draw from that experience still today as I'm working on the dreaded MOU that continues months and months later. So that, I think that answers the first question. And can you remind me what the second question was?
Yes, how this coaching experience maybe supplemented other training or restorative knowledge that you already had.
Absolutely. So I have had a lot of different training and experience. I'm a social worker, and so I bring different skills around facilitation. I understand trauma, but I think that there's a lot of nuts and bolts around creating an organization and running an organization with restorative principles. For example, Kathleen asked me about like liability insurance, and I'm like, that's something I need to look into, managing an organization, right? There's and just how to use the frameworks and the skills that I come with to apply it in a way that I am not necessarily used to. I think she really supported me in doing that as a director level, in doing the, for example, fundraising and grants. How do I do that in a way that brings in community? How do I do that in a way that is restorative, that doesn't have mission drift? How do I create a mission statement, right? And so bringing in the frameworks that I have, the skills that I have, but putting it towards a much larger skill set for managing and developing an organization that is RJ.
Thank you, Jenna. That's great. Yes, and I think probably many of us on the call, I know me included, can resonate with the feeling alone that all three of you touched on, and feeling like when you have restorative in your job title, or when you've been given some kinds of restorative justice responsibilities in your role, you're looked to sometimes as the expert, even though we're each still on our learning journey. And so from years of experience being the person that was looked at as the expert, I can say, like, I definitely wasn't and needed a community. And so do all of us, right? So that's what brings me so much joy in this program, because no matter where we are on the journey, if we're just going through our first restorative training or coming out of it, or we've been in the field for 20 years, we all could use a coach and support. So hopefully we can have that community. Another thing I wanted to mention is, after graduating from the coaching program, like Jenna was saying, there's ways to stay involved in this program and in the team. So we have quarterly connection circles that help all of us stay together and can be an ongoing support. It's not the same as having a one-on-one coach, but it's a community that we can come home to and continue making those connections that everyone mentioned here, that maybe started in a coaching session, but then it expands. And then we also have a yearly restorative retreat where all of the graduates from the coaching program, all of our coaches, and the national team come together to support one another and share wisdom. And all of those are like ongoing free professional development that comes from being a part of this program. So just wanted you to know, like, our ultimate goal is to never be alone. it's not just like these one-off programs and then you're alone again. It's like now we're a part of a family and we can continue together and support one another. So I know that we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure we have a chance for questions and answers, but also wanted to just check in with the team here to see if there's any final thoughts or things that you would want to share as we're looking at the Q&A. And as people, you can write down your Q&A, or you can also unmute and share. Okay. So we have a few things. The first one is, if you work in higher education, are you still eligible for coaching? So the answer to that question is it depends. Because this is a grant through the Bureau of Justice Assistance, we are focused on criminal justice related efforts, but that does include higher ed in some situations. So if you're working in a conduct office, or you find yourself in a position that sometimes crosses with the criminal justice system, a lot of times that can be Title IX related efforts when we're addressing sexual harm, and some other high-level conduct issues that happen in higher education. So that's where the overlap is. And so, yes, in those instances. Another question is, thank you, Bobby Sand, for the invitation. Thank you all for your connections and support through this journey. You are all appreciated. Oh, nice. Okay. How many applicants versus how many spots are there generally available? Great question, and that's a constantly changing answer. In the pilot, we were able to meet the needs of the people applying because we didn't fully market it yet. I imagine that we will reach capacity soon though. So I mentioned earlier that we have 40 practitioner spots per year. That's what the grant will support. And so we have 40 practitioners that can get the free coaching, and that's through 2027. So right now we're still able to meet most of the intake forms that are coming in, but there might come a time when we have more than we can support. And at that time, we'll probably close down the application so that everybody knows we've reached capacity for a while. And then once we've been able to meet the need, we'll open it back up. I am a new RJ coordinator in an admin role here at a new high school. I'm basically starting this program from scratch. Any advice that you could give for a school that has issues with vaping and marijuana? Okay. So let me pause on that one because I want to turn that over to our coaching team for some support. But and follow up with this last one. Does the answer you just gave about higher ed also apply to school RJ practitioners? So if a person's RJ position might overlap with criminal juvenile discipline, they might be considered. Yes, that's true. But also K through 12 education is a little bit more open because we want to make sure that all young people are staying in school and not having contact with the criminal justice system. And that can look like a lot of things, including creating a culture of restorative justice at the school sites and such. So we're trying to make a pretty strong case that K through 12 education is a foundational piece of making sure that young people do not reach the criminal justice system in the first place. So that's a little bit more open to maybe people that are having a job that's maybe like climate and culture coordinator on the campus, or teachers that have an influence over whether students stay in class or are referred out, so everybody is a part of that team. Okay, did I get all of the questions? Were there any others? So we can go back to that.
Justine?
Yeah.
Real quick, I do want to say for everyone who is joining us, at the moment, our funding requires that the work we support be taking place within the United States. So we know that there are a ton of amazing international programs and folks who are working on an international level. At the moment, unfortunately, the coaching program is not available for our international practitioners. If you are looking for connection and resources, please feel free to send us an email. Just know that with this particular funding, we can't provide coaching for international practitioners at this point.
Taninia, did you want to share any thoughts on Joshua's question?
I would love to, but it's not a 10-minute answer. It's literally, there's a lot of things that I would need to know in order to be able to answer the question. I would need to know what's happening currently. And, there's laws attached to vaping and marijuana use for kids under 18. So that is one that I do work with a lot in upper schools, but there's no easy answer to it, and it really has to do with where administration is in terms of giving students a chance. Some still are with no tolerance. Others can't be no tolerance, or else half of their population would be gone. Half of the kids would be expelled. And so it's really coming up with a strategy in order to figure out how to create a culture where part of belonging and restorative culture does not include vaping and marijuana uses within the school. So it takes time in order to figure out how the school is actually going to deal with it. And then you have the whole group of parents. So parents have to be okay with whatever's happening as well, because they're going to be either their children are going to be affected because they're using, or affected because they're not using. So it's a big question, and it's very real. I will tell you, you're not alone in terms of this is something that a lot of schools are spending a lot of time on, trying to figure out how to be restorative and say no. And I know that's not a good enough answer, but it's just way too loaded and takes time in order to build around how that's going to be dealt with.
Thank you. There was one other question, which is, can an individual or an organization receive coaching again the next year? So at this time, the funding is for 40 new practitioners per year. You can be from the same organization, but you can't receive coaching multiple times if you've already received it through this program at this time. Okay, we're coming to the end of our time. Any other questions, thoughts, comments before we close up? Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to our team, to Lucy for helping co-create this, to Avery for supporting our webinar tech backup, and to Kathleen, Taninia, and Jenna for participating, and to everyone who came. I hope that we'll be in touch. And if you have any other questions, you can see the website and our email in the chat. And I'm wondering if we can just do a one-word checkout of our team here to close us out. So I can start by saying I'm hopeful, and I'll pass it over to Taninia.
I'm grateful, and I'll pass it to Lucy.
I'm excited, and I will pass it to Kathleen.
I am inspired, and I'll pass to Jenna.
I'm feeling in community.
Thank you. And Avery. Are you there?
Grateful. I'm here. Grateful. Thank you.
Thank you all. We'll be in touch.